ran on reining in on spending, getting our fiscal house in order. Mr. Obama, on the other hand, ran on blaming the fiscal crisis solely on the evil wealthy and the Bush administration. He was able to rally much of his uninformed and naive base, telling them that if they only raised the tax rates of the top 2% of our nation's earners, everything would be great in the world, right? Give me an uh-huh. Uh-huh. It would solve absolutely everything. Seemingly, he convinced enough Americans that with 4 more years, he could finish the job of repairing all the horrible things that George W. Bush did to ruin our economy. Post-election, he boasts that he has a mandate to raise our taxes. Let the one-sided compromises begin. Throughout December, Speaker Boehner, Senator Reid, Senator McConnell, and President Obama all took turns coming to the microphones after secretive meetings. Remember that transparency stuff? They would come out and they would report progress. The next time they'd whine about stalemates. The president actually mocked the Republicans publicly for their inaction. And then he actually packed a suitcase, jumping onto Air Force One for a $4 million plus, and I've heard a lot more than that money, taxpayer-paid vacation to Hawaii during this critical time. The rest of us were left behind to tighten our belts. Enter Vice President Biden, the man of the hour, and he's going to save the day. So the fiscal deal is this. The Senate passed a frustrating bill to the House, while the president sought to punish successful taxpayers at $250,000 with higher taxes. The big compromise was to raise that threshold to $400,000 to $450,000. All taxpayers below that level were told that their taxes would not go up. Today, the Senate and House are deeply divided, and so is this country. This bill was 150 plus pages, and the House was given a very, very short period of time to read it. Tea Party conservative House members wanted to stand firm on their promises of no new taxes. Other Republicans were set on just passing the bill, feeling it was the best possible compromise we could get. No matter what the Republicans knew, they would have to eat the blame. So for that, some of them decided to simply bite the bullet, hold their noses, and vote for this mess. So those of us who do earn $404,000 to $450,000 or less have kept our taxes at their previous levels, right? This was a clean bill, right?
Wrong.
Right. That would be a no to both questions. First, 77% of Americans will have their take-home pay reduced. This is because of a 2% temporary reduction to employees' share of Social Security tax, and that expired and was not renewed. For a family earning $30,000 a year, this is an increase of $600 annually. The household earning $75,000 per year will pay an additional $1,500 annually. This bill, not surprisingly, is full of the usual pork. Here we go, hold on tight. There are $59 million for algae growers to encourage the production of biofuel. So you pull up to the beach and you fill her up. Electric motorcycle manufacturers were blessed with a $4 million grant for green energy and tax credits, Wind tax, $12.1 million. And let's remember to thank Hollywood for they brought him into office for their $430 million for producers to expense up. Oh, and how about $70 million to NASCAR? And we can thank our own Senator Stabenow for that. Here's a toast we can all celebrate. A rum tax subsidy for Puerto Rican rum makers. Mazel tov. So guess what, folks? This mess adds up to $4 trillion more into our national debt. And by the way, we should inform you that our own representative, Candace Miller, voted yes on this bill. Members here are encouraged to contact her, as well as our 2 illustrious and wonderful senators, to express our disappointment in this bill. Call them up, call them up, call them up. When they answer the phone, just say, what were you thinking? Are you out of your mind? Will it ever stop? The bottom line is this. There's only $1 in spending cuts for every $41 in tax increases. The threat of the fiscal crisis is never over. The new Congress was sworn in last week. And how sweet is this? Speaker Bader is once again Speaker of the House. He tells us that this is the dawn of a new day. He is quoted as saying he will no longer attempt private negotiations with the illustrious president. Once again, they have vowed to take on fast attacks to cut spending. Your president wants more tax revenue. We'll see. The next clock is ticking, and the next deal is in the near future. We need to collectively keep our voices strong and heard. We will stay together, and we must vow to reinvent this Congress. They will be re-educated, and they will be reminded that they work for us. We do not work for them. If not, sirs and madams, pack your bags, because we, the people, will prevail. Thank you. Okay, we're going to talk about some announcements coming up. Great. Okay, I'm just going to read off the little teleprompter here. We do have our ongoing bake sale. You all remember that that is one way that we help line the pockets so that we can bring all this great information to you. Since the Liberals do consider you all right-wing, white 2%ers, the bake sale prices have gone up a little bit. It was $1 last month, it's $1.04 this month. Okay, information and research table. Please go see Bill Gupton. He's going to be right up here outside the door, or right at the door, where you come in. And if you need to learn how to talk to a liberal, grab some of his literature, take an extra one for them, because the best response they can come up with is the. So give them some juice by taking some of that literature. Terry Martin is going to talk to you tonight about our postcard project, and that is going to be about gun rights, so I think it's going to be an interesting talk. John Olivo, right here, he is in the house tonight. He handles our lending library, and again, you can have an opportunity to do some great conservative reading. It's a book that you borrow, you keep, you read it, and you bring it back. Our merchandise table is also here tonight with Diane Babcock, so please stop and take a look at our merchandise table. Buy a t-shirt, pull up in front of the Democratic headquarters and just say, hey, how's it going? We have our donation jars out there, of course. Our next business meeting is on January 22nd at 7 o'clock, and that's always at the Lapeer Sportsman's Club on Lake George Road. Pardon me? 24th? Uh-oh. January 24th. And our next membership meeting is going to be, thank you, our next membership meeting is going to be on February 5th at 7 o'clock, and of course that's right here. I want to let you know you've been handed some literature too real quick. There are two important upcoming events that we, the Tea Party, would love to tell you about. One is this Saturday, I believe. And that is the Franklin Center for Government and Public Integrity. And is that the one that is also with AFP?
That one's on the 19th. The education one is on the 12th.
I apologize. Okay. Excuse me. The one that's this Saturday is at 12 noon. That's Michigan PAC Education Forum. That's at Oxford High School. And that is put on by MIPAC, or Michigan PAC. The cost for that is $10. It does include lunch, lots of literature, lots of upcoming wonderful things to learn about. That $10 is waived for those who are unemployed. Now, the one on the 19th is the one that is the watchdog training thing. And it's like a class, it's a breakout session. We would love it if you would come to that. You're going to learn a little bit more about social media, learn how to be a citizen watchdog, where you can promote transparency, common sense, and help expose the waste, fraud, and abuse of local governments. we want you to learn this kind of thing because they're not going to do it for you. And having been to a number of the different events that AFP puts on, I want to let you know that they make it affordable, and you are going to walk away from there amazingly uplifted. And you're going to be encouraged, you're going to be energized, and they make it very affordable. And I promise you, you're going to come out saying that was the best money I've ever spent. So do consider going to those two events, the next 2 Saturdays. If you need any more information about that, they're on the flyers, or come and see Bill. He's got a lot more to talk about that. And I think that's what I've got left for this evening. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Liz for the 5,000 year leap presentation. Thank you.
All right, well, Larry is normally the person that provides this information for you, but he's been going through all the chapters of a book for 28 principles of the 5,000 year leap regarding our Constitution. And it's been very, very informational for me to study it. I've been reading it to my 5-year-old. And she's like, wow. So, but today we're going to be studying about the topic of to be governed by the whims of men is to be subject to the capriciousness of those in power. Now, to keep it light, I'm going to start with a comment from Jay Leno. He said, the United States is putting together a constitution now for Iraq. Why don't we just give them ours? Think about it. It was written by very smart people. It's served us well for over 200 years. And besides, we're not using it anymore. So, anyways, that was Jay Leno. Okay, so this thing of being governed by the whims of men, it is the ruler's law at its worst. Nothing is dependable. No rights are secure. Nothing becomes fixed or predictable. Established things are in a state of flux, and there is no predictability, all of which make a very unstable country. Now, our founders had something different in mind. They perceived law as a rule of action. Together, the American founders and their Anglo-Saxon forebears had an entirely different point of view. They defined law as rule of action, which was intended to be as binding on the ruler as it was upon the people. We are seeing just the opposite of this happening. I won't have to say that as we go through this. You're just going to see the fraud that's happening in regard to these very fundamental principles of a constitution that a nation should live by. So it was designed to give society a stable frame of reference so people could feel secure. John Locke talked about the rule of action, and he said freedom of men under government is to have a standing rule to live by, common to everyone of that society, and made by the legislative power erected in it. Under established law, every person's rights and duties are defined. Anglo-Saxon common law provided a framework of relative security and a sense of well-being for people and things, both present and future. Such a society gives its people a sense of liberty under law. The American founders believed that without the protection of law, there can be no liberty. Locke pointed out that society must have fixed and enforceable laws. To this end, it is that men give up all their natural power to the society they enter into, and the community put the legislative power into such hands as they see fit, or else their peace, quiet, and property will be uncertain as it was in the state of nature. So, John Adams also addressed governed by law, and he said, no man will contend that a nation can be free that is not governed by fixed laws. All other government than that of the permanent known laws is the government of mere will and pleasure. That sounds familiar. Human experience has taught mankind this same principle down through the ages. Aristotle, all the way back, in his writing in Politics, said, even the best of men in authority are liable to be corrupted by passion. We may conclude then that the law is reason without passion, and it is therefore preferable to the rule of any individual. We deduct from this that Aristotle concluded that the teachings of his mentor Plato were wrong. Plato believed that in the ideal society, the people should be governed by the few who would rule according to scientific principles to force the people to do what is good for them. Law is a positive good in preserving liberty. As we have seen, the American founding fathers would have agreed with Aristotle rather than Plato. The founding fathers looked upon law differently than Plato. Instead of treating law as merely a code of negative restraints and prohibitions, as many of the young people in our society see them, they considered law to be a system of positive rules by which they could be assured of enjoying their rights and the protection of themselves, their families, and their property. Law was a positive good, not a necessary evil in their minds. This was precisely the view when John Locke wrote, "The end of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom. For in all the states of created beings capable of laws, where there is no law, there is no freedom. For liberty is to be free from restraint and violence from others, which cannot be where there is no law." Law should be understandable and stable. Wouldn't it be great if the legislators understood it? The founders were sensitive to the fact that the people have confidence in the law only to the extent that they can understand it and feel that it is a rule of relative permanence. It will be of little avail to the people that the laws are made by men of their choice if the laws be so voluminous that they cannot be read, or so incoherent that they cannot be understood, if they be repealed or revised before they are promulgated, or undergo such incessant changes that no man who knows what the law is today can guess what it will be tomorrow. I would like to finish with another quote from John Locke to bring a bit of balance. John Locke said, "Whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience." So that's something to consider. Next time, the 23rd principle of free society cannot survive as a republic without a broad program of general education. So that's it for now, and we'll do more next time. And now we are going to hear from Terry Martin on a very, very serious topic of, well,
Good evening.
Hi, Terry.
Tonight, our postcard campaign for January is the federal assault weapon ban. And like the graphic, if you go to the next slide, Bill, like the graphic at the top, gun control isn't about guns, it's about control. And I'll try to show you that tonight. What you've heard probably over the past 3 or 4 weeks since Sandy Hook has been nothing but emotion. And granted, a lot of that is appropriate. But you need to understand the facts with regard to gun control, and hopefully we can shed some light on that tonight. Unless you live in a vacuum, you're aware of the tragedy that struck Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut on December 14th. We all grieve for the loss of the 26 and 7-year-old children and 7 adult victims of this horrific tragedy. And our prayers go out to their families. This is a tragedy that none of us want to see repeated again, but to ensure that it doesn't, we need to identify and correct the actual root cause of the issue, not a knee-jerk response that will take away more of our constitutional rights. Unfortunately, because of the savage nature of this crime, it is being used by media and progressives in Washington to initiate more and stricter gun control. Right after Sandy Hook, Senator Dianne Feinstein indicated that she had legislation that would ban the purchase of M16 style assault rifles and high-capacity magazines because they've been identified as the weapons most often involved in the massacre-type killings. So the new legislation would be similar to the old 1994 assault weapons ban. I'd like to show you some interesting information, and hopefully it'll clear up some of the confusion that has been generated on this issue over the past few weeks. If you look up at the chart, you'll see that the bottom line talks about firearm homicides. There were 11,493 of those in the previous year, 2011. This data was compiled by the Center of Disease Control and the FBI. If you break that number down, that 11,500 number, into segments, all rifles account just 323 deaths. Assault rifles are a subset of the rifle category, so the actual number of assault rifle murders would be much less than 323. As you can see from the data, there are roughly twice as many deaths from unintentional falls, about 10 times more deaths than alcohol use, and about 46 times more deaths are caused by tobacco than by all firearm-related deaths combined. By the way, I'm not trying to justify these gun-related deaths. I'm just trying to put them in perspective for you. The category just below firearms, or above, I guess it's just above, isn't it? Non-firearm homicides can actually be broken down further also. For example, there were 1,587 homicides caused by knives, 728 by personal weapons. That's basically your hands, your feet, or your fist. So that were people that were beat to death. And I'm sorry to be so gross with this, but you need to understand what these numbers represent. 496 by blunt instruments, clubs or hammers. So more people were actually killed each year by blunt instruments than by assault rifles. So why doesn't the progressive people or the progressive legislators in Washington ban blunt instruments? And what's driving their desire to control guns? Remember, gun control isn't about guns, it's about control. Several weeks after Sandy Hook, Senator Feinstein's legislation had been rewritten to include over 120 semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, and pistols with detachable magazines. Many of these have been historically used for sporting and personal protection purposes. So who defines what an assault weapon is? The government. I suppose if you want to be cynical, you could say that the government could classify a hammer as an assault weapon. But where does it stop? The most troubling aspect of the provisions of this bill is the mandate for a federal database on gun owners. According to a summary of the legislation, the bill would unconstitutionally seek to register weapons in a federal database that would include photographs and fingerprints of gun owners. To keep a grandfathered weapon, that would be a weapon you purchased before the ban, under this proposal would require local law enforcement validation placed into the Federal Registry as mandated by the National Firearms Act, requiring a signature from a county sheriff or a city police chief. One of the many problems already cited with this plan is that some anti-gun local law enforcement officials could refuse to sign that waiver, leaving gun owners with the option of either giving up their weapons, facing arrest, or hiding them. So it's really not about stopping the massacre-style killings with assault rifles, is it? Not really. Remember, gun control isn't about guns, it's about control. And Democrats and progressives want American citizens to be unarmed. They're exploiting the tragedy at Sandy Hook to do it, and without regard to the Constitution, recent Supreme Court rulings supporting our gun rights, or determining the best policies to keep children safe while preserving those rights. I stated earlier that the only way to stop gun violence is to understand the root cause. Last Thursday night, I was watching an interview that Glenn Beck did with Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman. He's an internationally recognized author, soldier, and speaker who's one of the world's foremost experts in the field of human aggression and the roots of violence and violent crime. He made some very interesting points about massacres perpetrated by children and young adults in schools and other target-rich, gun-free zones. He voiced the concern that progressives are following an agenda that will disarm the American public by banning guns instead of looking for the real causes of the problem. His conclusion, after reviewing the history of these massacres, is that one major cause is violent entertainment that started back in the mid-60s. The movies, television, and video games that our children are exposed to each day have a much greater problem, are a much greater problem than guns in our society. He said that kids have become so hardened to the violence because of what they've seen over their lifetime that it doesn't affect them to see people slaughtered on the screen. Video games actually make killing fun and positively reinforce that by giving points to the number of people that are killed. So the more you kill, the more points you get in these games. He went on to say that if you look at historic data, the only school massacre in the United States prior to 1966 occurred on May the 18th, 1927 in Bath, Michigan, when a school administrator blew up a school building, killing 45 people, mostly children. And between 1927 and 1966, there were no school killings that involved more than 4 people. However, since 1966, there have been 11 school massacres where there were at least 6 and as many as 33 people killed and many more wounded. In 82% of those cases, the perpetrator was 28 years of age or younger. All would have been influenced by on-screen violence. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Where do we go from here? It seems clear that violence in entertainment on TV, the movies, and in video games has a dramatic negative impact on some children and young people. Not all, but some. And it must be studied and understood if we're to reverse this trend. And I'm sure that there's other issues that need to be addressed also. Things like mental illness. But to understand these issues, it will take actual studies and time. I certainly don't have the answers. That's why we let folks go to Washington to solve these kinds of issues. Will the root cause of excessive gun violence be resolved? I don't know. But what I do know is that law-abiding American citizens have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms for sporting purposes, for personal protection, and to protect themselves from a tyrannical government. That's what the Founding Fathers had in mind with the Second Amendment when it was originally written. We must demand that our leaders in Washington stop pushing gun control and better understand the real cause of the violence. What's affecting the person pulling the trigger before making changes that affect the rights of American citizens that have been granted to us by the U.S. Constitution for over 236 years. If you're interested in sending a note to your representative or your senator, stop by and see me after the meeting, and I'll be more than happy to set you up with the information about that. Now on to our guest speakers. But I do have one quick comment to make before we introduce the speakers. Earlier this month, the Lapeer Tea Party leadership team met with Senator Pavlov, Representative Daley, and Senator Green to discuss safeguards that could potentially protect, among other things, the gun rights of Michigan citizens. The Michigan Balance of Power Act may have the potential to stop the unconstitutional federal regulation, federal legislation, and executive orders before they can affect the state of Michigan and its citizens. This may be a way to stop the federal drift towards socialism, at least here in Michigan, through a formal reaffirmation of the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution by the Michigan legislature. The 10th Amendment to the Constitution states the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Senator Pavlov and Representative Daley have agreed to take this proposal forward to their legal staff for review and to determine its feasibility. And we would like to thank them for doing that for us. Also, For those of you who may not have seen this legislation, if you want to see the introduction and explanation of what the Michigan Balance of Power Act is and what the proposed bill looks like, they're posted on our website so you can review it there. Now, I'd like to take a few moments to introduce our guest speakers. Nice picture. Our first is Senator Phil Pavlov. He was elected in November of 2010 by the people of Lapeer and St. Clair counties to represent them in the Michigan Senate. Senator Pavlov is chairman of the Senate Education Committee and also serves as a vice chairman on the Senate's Natural Resources Committee and Environment and Great Lakes Committee, and is an active member of the Transportation and Regulatory Reform Committees. Prior to serving in the Senate, he completed 3 distinguished terms in the Michigan House of Representatives. Our next speaker is Representative Kevin Daly. Representative Daly is a longtime resident of Lapeer County and was born and raised in Attica Township, just a few miles down the road from where I live. Representative Daly was first elected to the Michigan House in November of 2008. He serves on 4 committees: Agriculture, Labor, Government Operations, and Great Lakes and the Environment. Prior to his election to the House, he served for 24 years as trustee, treasurer, and then supervisor of Attica Township. And our final speaker tonight is Senator Mike Green. Senator Green was elected to the Senate in November of 2010. He currently represents the 31st District, which includes Bay County area counties, and will be, with the recent redistribution, oh boy, I'm really messing this up, excuse me, but with redistricting changes, will also represent Lapeer County when he runs for re-election in 2014. He served as a representative for the 84th District from 1995 to 2001, where he worked to strengthen the Right to Farm Act, modernize the Michigan Drain Code, expand natural resources preservation, and enhance the freedoms of Michigan gun owners. Before public service, he was a tool and die maker at General Motors, retiring after 30 years in the skilled trades area. And during that time, he also operated a family farm for 17 years and served as a county commissioner for 8 years. First, I'd like to thank each of you, gentlemen, for coming tonight. I know that you all have busy schedules, and to fit us in, it is very much appreciated, so thank you for that. What we're going to do tonight to get started is we're going to have each of our guests take about 5 minutes to do an opening statement, and then after that, we're going to open to the floor where Liz Gilman and Bill Guffin are going to take your questions. Senator Pavlov, would you like to start?
Thank you once again. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's I'm honored to be able to start our new year off once again with the Lapeer Tea Party. We do this every year, and it's always great to be back. You know, when we look at the jobs that we all have to do, the jobs that you guys do, for you to get together and get a group together on a Tuesday night in January to come and hear what your legislators are up to, I think that's very important. I was talking to somebody earlier, and there aren't too many opportunities for us to address crowds like this, and you would think that, you know, this should be a common theme across our district. I know that Representative Daly and I routinely hold office hours, whether they be morning or afternoon or evening, because there's a lot of things that happen just west of here that don't always get accurately reported back to the constituents, back to our customers. And so these forums are always very helpful, and I'm always treated with great respect when we come here. So there are so many things that are in play, so many things that happened at the tail end of 2012 that you guys need to be brought up to speed on. You have to try to sort out kind of the rhetoric of what you're hearing on the news and really square it against what Senator Green and I have been working on in the Senate, and obviously Kevin in the House. This aggressive approach that we've taken to government in the last 2 years is not a function of radical Republicans in control. It's more of a function and a recognition that we're really coming out of the flaming last decade where we lost over 800,000 jobs in the state of Michigan, where we bumped up against 14% unemployment, where we were the only state in the country that lost population. We were the only state in the country after the census to lose a very powerful seat in Congress. That has implications to everybody in the state of Michigan. It has implications on what kind of federal funding we receive, on per capita, our transportation, our votes on critical issues that mean a lot to the people of the state of Michigan. We've lost one vote in Congress, and we argue where it went. It's somewhere down south where it's warm, most likely. So we continue to take a look at what we can do within the borders of the state of Michigan to be able to take care of our own business. And I'll tell you, if they would look from Washington to the last 2 years of activity in the Michigan legislature, they would clearly understand there is a way of dealing with the economic realities. You know, when Governor Snyder was elected, we took a very aggressive approach to fix what was wrong with Michigan. Governor likes to call reinventing Michigan. Well, that's what we did, because I stood in this room as a candidate in 2009 and talking about the virtues of eliminating the Michigan business tax, start talking about things that are going to put people back to work again. We've been able to do that. You know, when I was in the House, my last 3 years in the House included 2 government shutdowns under Democratic control. That wasn't going to happen when we moved into 2011 with a new group in town. What do? We took a serious look at our budget. We looked at our balance sheet. We saw that we had $2 million of fund balance in the bank, enough to run state government for about 30 minutes. Your local school districts and municipalities typically have 5 times that much money sitting in their fund balance in terms of reserves. We also knew that we had to address what was arguably the worst tax policy in the United States of America with the Michigan business tax. We went right to work on that very early. What do? We came up and presented a balanced, responsible budget in the month of June. It hadn't been done that way in nearly 30 years. We followed that up with all the necessary reforms that required very disciplined spending and an eye on the long-term liabilities that are just pulling down on the state of Michigan. And since then, we've since balanced our second budget on time. We've taken a look at the legacy costs that are strangling all of the taxpayers in this room and across the state of Michigan. And we've taken that opportunity under aggressive reforms to build up our rainy day fund. We have nearly $550 million in a state savings account today. We have addressed tens of billions of dollars in long-term unfunded liabilities by restructuring our retirement systems, both on the public side and with our education system. There's still a lot of work to do. You will hear a week from tomorrow, the governor will take the stage and he will give his State of the State address to the people of the state of Michigan and laying out his vision for what he would like to accomplish. And as legislators, we'll be listening. We will have our own ideas. Believe it or not, we are independent thinkers. So we will have the people in our district, my Senate 25th district that has about 270,000 constituents in it, we'll listen and we'll understand the plan, and then we'll go to work. We'll go to work on trying to get the consensus that we need. I know there'll probably be a lot of questions later on, and I would rather use that time to address your concerns. So, who's ever up next? Senator Green. Mike Green. I've had the honor of serving with Mike. Mike is one of our more interesting characters in the Michigan Senate. I say that in a good way.
Well, I'm kind of new to probably everyone. Nobody knows who I am. Who is that guy? Where did he come from? What's he doing? So, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little bit of, maybe not extra time, but a little bit of time and just let you know who I am. first. What drove me into this terrible occupation to want to work with the legislature and try to make our state better. So a little bit about me. First of all, my wife, Paula, is with me tonight. Paula, raise your hand. She's been my right arm for a long time, and now she's lost her left arm. She had a stroke about a month and a half, or a year and a half ago, but she's coming back. It's just taking a little bit of time, but we're working together on it. Paul and I raised 5 children, and we have 20 grandchildren. And it makes it a very lively place around our house at Christmas time. My oldest daughters and her husband are missionaries in South Africa, Baptist missionaries. They have 4 kids. I have my oldest son lives next door. He's a log home builder. My middle son is a Baptist minister who left a church in New York to come and be the principal of our Christian school in Juniata, and he's doing that right now, which is just an ambassador. And my youngest daughter married a pastor, so she's active in their church in Clio, and my youngest son, Peter, is also in the log home industry. But they've given us 20 grandkids, and we're proud of them. And we love them to death. It's busy at Christmas. A little bit about my history. I am a tool and die maker. I served 30 years with General Motors in tool and die. Probably if I look back at my career, probably would not have been my first choice as I look back. But it paid the bills and helped me get our kids through school, and it was a worthy occupation, and it also helped me to raise our kids. I was also a farmer. To get my fun out of life while I was working in the shop, I bought a farm and to raise my kids on. And probably the biggest thing I wanted to do was teach my kids how to work. And I think I did. They're all hard workers and they're doing well. None of them are living with me again like some are. But like a whole lot of other guys, I worked in the shop and farmed, and first thing you know, all my shop money went to the farm. And then I tell people I farmed until I ran out of money, which isn't unusual either. Ran for county commissioner and served 8 years, and then decided to run for state rep. And I put a campaign together and ran for the state house. Represented Huron and Tuscola County for 6 years, and I was term limited. And after that, I had to sit out 2 years, and I ran for the Senate. Now, the Senate was a little bit different district than my House district. It was a little bit more heavier Democrat, and my campaign there, without discussing the whole campaign, I kind of got blistered, you might say. 38 to 62. Well, I kind of took a drubbing, and after that, my wife and I figured, we're done. We're all out of politics. That was kind of the Lord saying, you've had enough. And so I sit out for 8 years, and then during that time, I started a small business with my boys. When we first, my younger boy got in, I got into working in the log home business with my older boy, started another business, and then he got in with me, and so that's what I did for about 8 years. And about 8 years later, the call came knocking, a couple calls came to me and said, hey, Senate seat's open again, you want to run for the Senate? I said, no, I'm done. I don't want that anymore. And my wife was shaking her head. And then next day, another call. From Lance, he said, hey, Senate seat's open. You look like the guy that could win the seat. Polls look pretty good. Absolutely not. I'm done. I don't want anything to do with it anymore. And then the next day, another call came, a little higher up, and said, hey, we really need you to run. We need somebody for that seat. Again, I knew it was a heavy Democratic seat, and I just didn't feel like I wanted to put a campaign together and lose again. And I looked over at my wife after I hung up and kind of smiled, and she said, that's a pretty big decision you had to make there, wasn't it? And I said, yeah, it was a big decision. She said, don't you think you ought to ask the Lord what we ought to be doing instead of you making that decision? And, I think that kind of changed gears. And that after I did seek his advice, I threw my hat in the ring and ran. So why did I run? I believe in small government. I believe the state government and federal government is too big. I don't know if you know this or not, but 40% of our whole state budget is federal money. The federal government runs each and every one of us. And that was another one of the things. But the thing that really got me involved in politics the first time was the life issue. I'm very pro-life. I'm a strong advocate of life, and those are some of the things you never change. There was a number of issues last year that we dealt with, and Phil's talked about a few, I'm sure. Representative Daly is going to talk about a few. Let me talk to you about two of them, if I may. I am a strong Tea Party guy. When I decided to run, I told my group that I was a Tea Party guy before there was ever a Tea Party. And I was one of the top conservative voters in the House. But after you get a drubbing like I did the first time, you look back and see, well, maybe this district's a little bit different, and maybe I ought to reconsider some things. Well, I wasn't willing to do that. I ran for office because I thought that was the right thing to do. But during my campaign, I made a decision right off the bat and I made it clear and plain at a Tea Party meeting that I would support right to work. Knowing it was a snap decision that I made and didn't think it out. Later I sit back and thought it out a little bit more, looked at the implications of that, and felt like that I probably ought to reconsider my support of right to work. So I did. I reconsidered it. I spoke about it during the campaign. I spoke about it at Tea Party meetings. That it was a political decision. It was not a hard decision. And after I got elected, I really never expected to have to vote on it. But I made my statement. I'm not going to support it, and here I am. So as we went on for 2 years, nobody ever expected the vote to come up. After the last election, where Proposal 2 went down so heavy, everybody said, well, all right, it's time, we're going to vote for it. Looking back on the decision that I made, I would not support it. I told my caucus that if you need me, I'll support it. But I told people during the whole campaign for the last 2 years I wouldn't. And they said to go ahead and not vote for it, so I didn't vote for it. Could I have voted for it? Sure, I could have voted for it. The reason they'd rather I didn't vote for it was because we're expecting some major recalls after that vote. And probably my district was one of the heaviest union districts in the state, and they knew for sure that we'd have a campaign there. And they really didn't want to spend the $1 million that it was going to take to defend my seat in a recall. I mentioned this to the folks that I met with last week, the leaders of the Tea Party, and I said, I'm sorry that it happened this way. I know that's a big issue with you folks. I do know it is. But the bill passed. Someone asked me, well, how can we ever trust you again? And I said, well, all you can do is look at my record. I've got a list of things I can rattle off here to you, of things I supported, things that you cared about, things about cutting our salary, cutting our benefits, legislators, things that I knew was important to a lot of people in the district. They didn't vote for right to work, and that was kind of the reason why. The other one issue is early in 2011, the health exchange was a big deal in the Senate. I knew the governor, it was something the governor really, really wanted, but I also knew it was something that if we didn't pass it, the federal government would. And I also knew that, and I wasn't sure about the funding. So as it came down to it, I went ahead and voted for the health exchange. If I had that vote back, I probably wouldn't vote for it again. But I did then. It's on my record. Here I am. I do not support Obamacare. No way do I support Obamacare. And you know, we can probably sit down and debate all night about what everything's going to happen with Obamacare. It was at that point then that the courts had not ruled. I supported that. I would not support it today. In fact, me and another time up, okay, let me finish this one and I'll sit down. Me and another fellow just stopped $31 million from being appropriated of Obamacare money, and the appropriation's going to be, it didn't pass. The House held it up, so that didn't happen. But I wanted to share that with you. Two of the votes that you probably could hold against me for the rest of my life, and that's the way they came down. So I will sit down and let Kevin go.
Well, thank you. You know, senators are known to be a little longer-winded than representatives are. So I'll wrap this up rather quickly, but no, it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here tonight, and thank you folks all for your support in the last election. It was greatly appreciated. You know, I'm coming up. I'm an old timer now. I've been in there 4 years. I'm on my last term, believe it or not. So with term limits the way they are, that's the way it works today. We just get folks in there and just get you so you're figured out and you know what you're doing. And guess what? You're all done. You're out the door. So that's the bad thing about term limits. We've had that discussion before. But as you folks know, just let's jump back, as Phil mentioned a little bit. 4 years ago when I first came in, Phil and I were seatmates. We sat right next to each other on the floor, and we sat through some very poor administrative running for the state of Michigan. We sat there, you know, they talked about the countdown clock. I actually had a computer sitting on the front of my desk the last few days of September counting down the deadline when they shut the clock off in the House office building because midnight came and it was October 1st. So they just shut the clock off so we can continue to vote on things trying to pass the budget. That was the way things were run in the previous administration. To be perfectly honest with you, what I see going on in Washington is very similar to what went on in Michigan for the 8 years prior to this legislature we got there today. So, you know, I'm proud to come in and say, you know, one thing that I ran on 4 years ago and I ran on 2 years ago is the Michigan business tax. Over the last 2 years, we got rid of the Michigan business tax. That was a huge thing for the state. We've balanced our budget both years in May instead of October. You know, we've done what we said we were going to do. You know, whether you like the governor or whether you don't like the governor, whether you like what we've done or whether you don't like what we've done, this guy is truly, I mean, the people out there are screaming. I'll tell you what, he's ticked off as many Republicans as he has Democrats. He's ticked them both off. So that to me says this guy's doing what he needs to do what's right. You know, Senate Bill 59, Senator Green's gun bill, he vetoed it. He told us the reason he vetoed it. You know, I think Sandy Hook really had nothing to do with it. I think he was going to veto it anyway. I think he had issues with it, and he admitted that right up from the beginning. He's an honest person. He's straightforward. He tells us the way he feels. Some of the things we've done, I know a lot of people are upset with. I know there's going to be some questions about the tax on pensions. Was that the right way to do it? I don't know, but you know what? We balanced our budgets and we did it. Are there some problems with that? Yeah, but you know, I'm sure the questions are again the fact of the way we set that up and why we set it up the way we did. And you know, when you're making sausage, as they say we do in politics, sometimes you have to do that. When it comes to the gun laws, I've been meeting in the last week. I supported Senate Bill 59, and my wife's a school teacher. You guys all know that, I think. But I would prefer that the gun game, the guy that's coming in there to cause ruckus in my wife's school doesn't know which one of those teachers has a gun. Because, you know, as soon as they let that same respect, let me tell you again, I never thought about the fact till I met some deep concern with that from some high school teachers. And I was only thinking about grade schools, I was thinking about high schools. There's a lot of difference between a second grader that weighs 50 pounds and a 200-pound 10th grader and a small teacher. So, you know, some of the high school concerns in guns is a little different than grade school concerns in guns. And I met with a teacher last week and he's a hunter, he's a supporter of gun rights, but he doesn't vehemently opposes guns in schools, and he's got his reasons for that. So I think our job is to look at both sides. With one thing we certainly don't want to do, we want the dog out of the federal government telling us what we can do. We need to do it in our state. We don't need to do it in federal. So, with that, I don't need to talk anymore. You know, well, just real quickly, I'll mention right where I want to tell every group that I can this, you know. We heard the news, you know, I've been there for 4 years, so we saw the protest. We saw the first Tea Party event in Lansing where they said there was 2,000 people there. And then we saw the protest from some of the union folks where there was 6,000 people there. And I got pictures out of my office window that show the numbers of people at both events, which was about the same amount of people. So it's kind of unusual that the media counts them differently in certain ways. And then a few weeks ago when we did Right to Work, I'm telling you that the reports were out that there was 12,000 people in Lansing, and I can tell you there was not 12,000 people in Lansing. Number one, I talked to state police when we were leaving. I said, you know, looking out those windows, there's not 12,000 people there. They had pictures from the 4th floor of the Capitol building with the Tea Party event. And granted, there was a couple thousand people in the Capitol building that day, so there was probably more people there, but the event out the windows from the Capitol building from the Tea Party event and from that event last week was about the same amount of people outside. So we're guessing 6,000 to 7,000 people were there last week, and the state police agreed with me when we left. That's probably they figured was really there. The majority of those people were good people. They were there because they didn't like Right to Work. There's, you know, when you get 6,000 people together, there's bound to be some problems that happen, and there was some things that happened that shouldn't happen there. But the majority of those people there were good people that were really concerned about Right to Work. And I don't know if that concern was justified or not. Personally, I voted in favor of it. I don't think it was justified. I had a town hall meeting here in Lapeer. Some of you folks were there, I think. I was told when I went in the day that we were going to vote, I was told by some folks that, well, you had a town hall meeting. You can't vote in favor of this. You saw 95% of the people there were opposed to Right to Work. And I looked right at this person and I said, so you want me to make my decision based on what happened at a town hall meeting? You really want me to make my decision based on that? Because I can make a town hall meeting, do whatever I want to make it do, depending on how you set it up. So I based my decision on what I thought were the facts. I asked those folks for the facts, and nobody could instill in me that it was the wrong thing to do, so that's why I voted the way I voted. But with that, I don't know if we turn it over to now. Is Liz coming up? Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm sure there are a few of you out here who have some really important questions to ask, and this is the perfect place to do it. We just ask that you stay peaceful. One of the benefits of meeting in a church is that it's relatively, a common ground, right? So let's try to stay peaceful. I know some of this is very controversial, but we're very grateful that these fine gentlemen have joined us this evening, so we would like to respect their time. And let's all just try to keep it short, and one question per person. I'm going to be standing over here, and then Bill Gupton is going to be a floater around for anybody else who has a question. So anybody who wants to ask a question, just come right over here or see Bill, and just address it to whoever you have the question for. And Bill, I'll let you hold this, and I'll take this. Hello. Okay. So whoever is ready to go with their important question, we're going to start with this man right here in the back.
My name is Mark Gillen, and I have a question for all of you. What has been legislated to protect citizens from violent criminals that sets us apart from, other areas? It seems to me there's a lot of violent criminals moving in my neighborhood that should never be free.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think when you take a look at the state budget, and Senator Green is on the appropriation side, it's the fastest growing part of state government. I can tell you that when I came into the State House in 2005, I championed Jessica's Law. And if you remember, Jessica Lunsford was a 9-year-old girl down in Florida who was kidnapped, held against her will for nearly 3 weeks in a trailer park in the Tampa area, and was brutally raped and drugged. I connected up with her father, and he was crisscrossing the United States trying to implement Jessica's Law, which was really addressed to repeat sex offenders. And so for the very first time in Michigan, we got the judges of the state of Michigan to agree to mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines for repeat sex offenders. And so today in Michigan, because of that legislation, specifically toward the repeat child offenders that we know are going to be a continual problem in society, we're now locking them up for a minimum of 25 years and then lifetime sentence for repeat offenders. But we got a long way to go. When you look at where Lapeer is right now, and you can only look to the west where, we're not far from Flint, and we know that the problems is one of the most violent cities in Michigan. Where I am in St. Clair Township, 50 miles from the city of Detroit. And then you go to our north where Saginaw is. The problem that we have, and I think Mayor Dave Bing summed it up very well last week when he said, lost respect for human life in our society. And you can point to all the ills around us. The reality is that our laws and our systems and our incarceration system is a big ticket item in the state of Michigan. So what are we doing? We're working on looking at sentencing guidelines. We're looking at programs where we separate the people that we're mad at from the people that we're afraid of. And I think that, I come from county government where we looked at sentencing guidelines and pretrial services to be able to better identify who the bad guys are. I mean, are we really locking up, parents that are behind in their child support today? Or is there a better way of dealing with that problem where we can utilize our very valuable local county jail space? We've had to close down prisons in the state of Michigan just because of cost, because of the massive dollars involved in incarceration. But, I think that you're going to have that conversation about, many communities have become very creative with mental health courts, with drug courts, in a way to get involved earlier maybe and separate out the worst. But we have that problem in Michigan, and it's probably one of our largest budget challenges. So that's a great question.
That was a good answer, but do we?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from all.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, we can pass all the laws that are on the book, especially we can pass gun laws. We can pass all kinds of laws. When I was in the House from 95 to 2000, we passed minimum sentence laws. And if you did 5 crimes, you were in for life. Next 8 years, they took them all off. I mean, it seems like that happens continually. One administration will pass very conservative laws, the next administration will change them back. So it gets frustrating to us that we're passing laws, number one, the Michigan Business Tax, that 10 years ago we voted out, but it came back again. So our prisons are full, our jails are full. Every jail in the state is adding on, bunking on, renting out space from other places, and it's still not enough. I think a whole lot of the problems are we're creating these crimes ourselves, especially with the things that we've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 weeks about the video games, and I did see that Glenn Beck show the other day with Lieutenant Colonel. It really, really impressed me. But so many things we are doing to ourselves, we're making criminals. But so in order to pass more laws, we got to have more prison space. And I think Phil said it right, was we got to find out what type of people do we lock up? People that we're mad at or people that we're scared of? And I don't think we're there yet.
Personally, I don't know that locking more people up settles the problem. I think the problem starts all the way back at a level of family values, and when we start out with what we learn at home. The problem we've got with the kids in schools, the problem we've got in schools with parents that I don't know if you have seen this. I think that was on Facebook. There's a cartoon out there that shows in 1960 a parent standing behind the desk with a student with their kid, and the teacher is behind the desk, and the parents and the teacher are looking at the kid shaking their finger. Why'd you get this grade? On the other side, that was in 1960, and today it shows the parents and the student yelling at the teacher, why'd you give me this grade? And the kid's over there smiling, It's a problem we got to fix. And we've got serious problems socially in this country with the fact that, you know, between abortions and between the good people out there only wanting to have 1 and 2 kids apiece, but yet but the slime of the earth is having multiple kids and living off the system, and we're creating what's going to happen in another 20, 30 years if that continues. There's already almost more of those type of people than there are the good people, the good working families. Somehow we've got to get the social problems fixed in our state, and I think that helps take care of it. But you've got the violence that comes into play with violent games we've got that we talked about up here earlier. Some of these video games that these kids play today where you actually get more points for killing more people. I mean, come on, we need to get rid of that stuff. We've got these wonderful actors out there that are all against gun violence, but then they create all these movies and videos that are the most violent things. Movies that are the most violent movies out there, killing people and everything. So we've just got a whole problem of our society out there we've got to fix. And I don't know the answer to it, Mark.
All right, we've got a question here.
My name is Rob Holland, and I'd like to congratulate Kevin and Phil for their hard work this Senate, because I look at your voting, how many times you were working and voting for bills and working in the House, compared to us, a representative and a senator down in Detroit. I think they have a total of 34, while the representative down in Detroit had something like 463 missed votes. So I appreciate your work for that. So you should be congratulated for that. Well, I have many questions about healthcare and many of this, but the one question I want to ask is, on retirement funds, the governor is at 6%, I believe that's the percentage is for the retirement fund, or IRAs, or whatever. I don't have a whole grasp of that, but my whole idea on taxes is, rather than charging, like the state charging 6%, why don't the state go and say, okay, we're going to only do 3%? I would think that would be more enticing for people to move into Michigan to start businesses and living in this great state and doing many things, rather than charging such a high rate on the percentage. Also, it will provide more people to pay taxes. You won't find, I believe, you won't find so many people that will try to get away from 6% versus maybe like a 3%. Because Reagan did this, and the only reason Reagan's policies failed was because Congress turned around and spent a whole lot of money. That was the reason why his program didn't really work, because Congress turned around and spent a whole lot of money. And I'm wondering, why couldn't we suggest to the governor and say, well, 6%, why don't we just drop it down to 3% to entice more people to pay taxes and more people to come to Michigan? So, that's... Oh, any of them. I don't care for any particular person.
I guess I don't know that I have an answer. I guess I consider that more like a statement that I don't disagree with it.
I guess it would be more of a statement, but why wasn't there an approach to that, rather than, why couldn't we say 3%? Why can't you go back and look at that law again and just change it down and bring it down further? Is there a way of doing that?
Well, there's always a way to change law. Sure, do you want to talk about that, Phil?
I need to say something real quick.
You identified where we're going on, at least on the income tax side. When we made the changes in eliminating the Michigan business tax, which was a very complicated, cumbersome, very expensive tax, we changed to a income tax in the state of Michigan. We did that in 2011, and last year we lowered that rate. The rate is 4.35% on income tax in the state of Michigan. But just in October, we began ratcheting that down. It's now 4.25%. And so we're scheduled to go to 3.9% over the next 5 years, and it was actually the House that led that initiative to start bringing that rate down. And the idea fits exactly what you're trying to say. Lower the rate, have it across a bigger base so that we can encourage that growth. And we're starting to see evidence of that in the state's economy. And that's going to continue to go down 1/10%. Now, you don't think 1/10% means a lot to you guys and your household? Well, here's what it means to the state of Michigan. It was a $100 million tax cut to every worker in the state of Michigan just on October 1st of this year. So.
Right. Thank you. All right, we've got another question here.
Last April or maybe March, Phil and I met regarding taxing the people's pension. And of course, he gave me a politician answer. Long and dragged out. Gee, what was the question now? But anyways, I have seen since then my attorney and my accountant, and they laid it out in layman's terms. If you're born a 53 or after, the first 20,000 you're taxed. But before 53, say 52 or before, it's after 20,000. Gentlemen, that is age discrimination as far as I'm concerned. And they both agreed. But again, nobody's going to challenge it. Another thing about the tax and the pensions, you did it on what the basis of what the people that are working right now, the regular working people, you taxed it the same. You should have taxed it half. No, you got greedy and you took the whole part. You know, I talked with Mike Lapeer at the Mackinac Center, and he approached the governor and showed them they could save $500 million. Out of that savings, how much did the governor look at and make the cuts? Zero. None of them. So it seems to me that the government wants to keep taking away from the people, but not give them nothing back when they deserve it. And when you change the rules at the end of the game, it's not fair. Don't you all agree? That's not a fair thing. I think that should be addressed when you go back and look at getting that changed. One more thing. Can you guys sponsor a bill regarding the labeling of GMO food products? They're doing it out in California and other places. We need that here too.
You're here.
Get all choked up.
I just want to mention the fact, you know, whenever you do something like we did with the pension tax, there's going to be losers. I mean, when that legislation first started, it was just, there was not going to be any exemptions for anybody. Everybody's going to pay it. And so this was the great, it wouldn't have made any difference. Say, for instance, if we would have did it that way, it would have started everybody right off the bat. If we would have said everybody gets a 50% break that's already retired, then what about that guy that retires tomorrow? He's not going to get any break. So there's always going to be a, no matter what you do, but it had to go through a long process over there to get the agreement to come up with what we ended up with. I argue with people all the time when they say it's a senior pension tax, because in all reality we exempted the seniors. The main reason why I supported that tax, and I might have told this group this before, but it's a very simple analogy. You say, for instance, my daughter is married and has 3 little kids and lives in a house, and her and her husband are both working full-time, making $80,000 a year, paying 4.35% taxes in the state of Michigan. And right across the road from them lives 2 retirees, making maybe $70,000 a year, but not paying a penny in taxes. They're going to, and they can be 52 years old. And I couldn't see where that's fair. I don't think that's fair. So that was the reason why I supported it. I looked at the fact that I think a pension tax, you're using all the systems, and the problem we got is people aren't retiring at 67 and 70 years old anymore. They're retiring at 52 and 50. Some people retire. My father-in-law retired at 48 years old. So that's the reason why I supported it. But with that, I don't know if you had something to respond to that, or if you want to.
I do.
Okay.
And it's based on age. Never before in the history of this state, I think it was back in the 70s, they stopped taxing pensions. Has ever been based on age. That's the key. Treat everybody fairly. Don't age discriminate against people.
So you would have been better off with it, you say, if we just did it.
I would be better off if it was someone who was born in 52 or 1951 being taxed the same as me. Okay? You got the piece of paper, and so does Mike. I gave it to Phil last year, but he used it for the backside. He used it for notes.
Let me just say one thing, that tax cut was passed in the late 90s under John Engler, and I was a part of voting for that part too. But I think probably each one of us voted for something that could have been a whole lot worse if we hadn't negotiated down and held our vote back. There was a lot of consternation amongst all of us. But the thing that we all campaigned on was Michigan business tax. Michigan business tax. We've got to cut the Michigan business tax because of jobs. We've got to have jobs, and we're not there yet. But I don't know if we all remember 2 years ago, every door I knocked on was, what are you going to do about jobs? What are you going to do about jobs? Every event I was at, it was all about jobs. And so to go down there and vote for something that we thought was going to improve jobs, they happened to throw another little glitch on it. And they stuck us with that in the same bill. And so I think that's probably what caught all of us. But they wanted a whole lot more than what we ended up negotiating down.
Since you were picking on me at the beginning, let me jump in here. And you're one of the most frequent visitors to my office hours, and we've had this conversation. The reason I give you a political answer is because this is politics. This is what we do. We're politicians. But the point that I want to make with this, and Senator Green touched on it, when that plan was introduced, it was planned, just for everybody in the audience, pension income in the state of Michigan has been taxed forever. Okay? So what the legislation did over the years is we exempted dollar amounts. And so before we changed it, there was a $40,000 personal exemption against your income. So the first dollar after $40,000 was taxed at 4.3%. The governor proposed in 2011 the complete elimination of that exemption. So Michigan income tax on pension income still in place. Now, that was a $960 million tax increase. And we began working immediately to reduce that down. We reduced that down by $650 million, and I passed that information along to you at one of our earlier office hours. And the reason that we did that is look at the reality. Where we are in Michigan today, the population that's 65 and older is going to grow by 24% in the next 15 years. Right? Okay, whatever. Well, here's what this means, is that the workforce and the taxpayers supporting a larger segment of the population that isn't contributing to the well-being and services of the state of Michigan will drive you to bankruptcy. And so we looked at it and we said, after 67, you would be exempt, your income would be exempt. You know, below that, for that next base, we would still allow you a $20,000 exemption. And for those who have been fortunate enough to be able to retire, their pension income, whether it was from working for the state police or UPS or the sale of a family farm that pays your retirement income, everybody needs to be treated the same. And you're treated at the same rate as we're taxing unemployment benefits in the state of Michigan. And the notes that he did give me, I did put notes on those, Mark, to go back and double check the thing. So happy to talk more about it. Come to the next office hours and try to clear it up, but I don't think we're going to get into an age discrimination. And by the way, the federal government will be looking at indexing Medicare very soon. So if you're receiving it at 62, look for that to move to 65, look for that to move to 67. Not because we have this anxiety and this animosity toward retirees. It's the simple fact that 20 years ago, you had 7 active employees paying for everyone retiring on Social Security. It's now 3 actives supporting everyone, every single worker on Social Security. You will run out of math, you will run out of dollars, and that's an economic reality.
Okay, we have a couple of questions here in the back.
Yes, thank you gentlemen for coming out and meeting with us tonight. And I know both you, Phil and Kevin, I know very well. Mr. Green, we've met a couple times. But my question coming up is kind of near and dear to my heart and a lot of folks. We've made a lot of changes in our education. I know the governor's going to be we're going to be introducing, I think probably at his speech next week, but what kind of direction do you think we're going to go? The reason I ask is for me, as a parent, as a conservative, whatever we decide is the cost to fund a child for K-12, I think that cost should be the same if it's in Lapeer County or Detroit or Mackinac, wherever, instead of the swing that we've got. And I understand we're making amends on here, so I'm not knocking anybody, but what do you think, what are your insights as what we might expect coming up this year in regards to education funding for K-12?
If I may, only though I know that the funding is hardly not much more than last year's. I'm going to refer to Phil. Phil's our education expert. He's been right on top of education since I've been in the Senate, and he can probably give you a better outlook. Funding, I can tell you, it doesn't look like there's going to be any more money for the schooling fund than there was last year, which is a problem.
I think the direction that we've been trying to push in equitable funding, and you'll see these communities, Birmingham and the more affluent communities that are getting more tax dollars ultimately to educate a student there. There's always been some proposal they went into place. I'm trying to get a smoothing, a 2x formula for every dollar that comes in for new revenue for school aid, that the communities that are getting lower get $2 for every community that gets 1. It's an evening out system, but I think where you're really going to see it, and it's going to move more toward a formula of truly having the money follow the student. And when you can get to that point, it's going to force the economic vitality of local school districts to compete for that student's dollar and that portion of foundation allowance. We have a very complicated funding formula, but when we talk about what's happening in school education funding, look at the sources that we fund education with. Sales tax, Michigan income tax, local property taxes, look around your community. So you see this downward pressure on that fund. We hope that we can at least maintain the same level. We've worked really hard to drive efficiencies. The 20% copay on insurance premiums has been a great tool for local school districts. I talked a little bit earlier about reforming the retirement system. That is a millstone around the neck of public education that can lead it to bankruptcy if we don't make those necessary changes on employee contribution into a retirement system that's outdated, underfunded, and headed for the ditch. So we work on trying to give those tools to local districts so that they can maximize their budgets. And it's an equity issue, and every year we have that same equity battle. But I think you'll start to see, it might not be this year, next year, but the trend will be money follows students. So wherever your student goes, we've opened up opportunities for cyber education, dual enrollment at our community colleges. So that kid gets $7,000 in his or her backpack at the beginning of the year. They go out and they purchase the kind of education that fits them, whether it's career technical education, dual enrollment. So we continue to beat down those barriers on choice and option.
Okay, we have a question here.
Yes, I've got a question for Senator Pavlov. I'm asking you this as one of your constituents and as a registered professional civil engineer in the state of Michigan. So I need you to put your transportation hat on for a minute. This topic's been near and dear to me for many, many years. It has to do with road performance. There's a lot of confounded issues that go into the performance of a road. Like lately, all I see is the efforts by the government to increase funding for the repairs of the roads. And I don't see much effort on the Michigan Department of Transportation's side of things to find out what the actual root cause that is causing the degradation of the roads over time prematurely. And what are we going to do to solve that problem before we go before the people to get more money? In other words, if we have a spending problem with respect to roads due to the poor performance. I don't know if it's engineering, construction, the assumptions that they make during the engineering process, the loading of the trucks. We have the highest load limits in the United States, one of the few states that has that. I also know that 2/3 of those trucks are gravel haulers, based on the Michigan Department of Transportation's own statistics. So we're basically tearing apart the roads that we're building as we carry the gravel across the roads to rebuild them. The benefit of these higher loads is typically for the logging, mining, agricultural, and steel hauling industries. You would think that we could distribute those loads among a larger number of trucks. I know it would raise costs, but for instance, with the automakers and coil stock, we could certainly put that cost across the nation because we send our cars everywhere. We shouldn't have to bear the burden of the cost of the roads to facilitate their hauling of these heavy loads. Whereas up north, with the agricultural, lumber, and mining industries, that's a different bag, if you will, but most of the roads that we have problems with are down here in southeast Michigan. We have a high rate of freeze-thaw cycles, we have poor drainage, list goes on and on. Specifically, what is the government doing to identify the root causes and come up with a strategy to improve the roads, not just from a funding perspective?
That's a lot, and that's a very, it's a very timely question. I think when you take a look at the root cause of where we're at in infrastructure, you only have to look at the way that we're taxing our road system, what we're using to pay for the roads. And we pay 18 cents a gallon on every gallon of gas to go strictly dedicated to highway construction and reconstruction and maintenance. Now,
I don't want to hear about funding, I want to know what.
I know you don't, but I'm going to tell you anyway because it's the root cause of the problem. The funding dollars, as our vehicles, this is the point, as our vehicles become more efficient, as our economy has lapsed into a recession, we are literally collecting less of a percentage to fund our roads. So at 18 cents a gallon, if you're driving a car that gets 25 miles a gallon versus a car that used to get 15 miles a gallon, our fleet has become more efficient, and the bottom line is the revenues coming in has impacted the amount of work that we can do. Now, here's what we're doing about it. I've been on the transportation committee since I was elected to the House. You being an engineer, you understand the concept of design, build, and warranty. Okay? There's nobody, you as an engineer are not going to hold yourself responsible for a warranty on a road for a contractor to come in there and build the road to the specifications unless you can warranty it. So the trend nationally has been rebuilding our infrastructure with a design-build system that offers a 25 or 30-year warranty on the serviceability of that road. These are ideas that have been tried in the state of Michigan, and they continue to show some promise. But the reality is that you don't want to talk about the dollars, but it's the fact. For every dollar that we send to Washington on our federal gas tax, you're only getting about 92 cents back, while other states are getting $1.10 back on that investment. And so we have to continue to fight in Lansing, in not only in Lansing, but in Washington. When I mentioned that we were the only state in the country to lose a vote in Congress, well, that's a function of it, because we're not as powerful to be able to go out and fight for what you have paid in the form of federal tax gas to the federal government in a return. The other thing that comes, I mean, we've gone through this whole conversation about the maximum weight load. In Michigan, you can have 160,000 pounds spread out over 11 axles. My family business used to haul coil steel. You go back to the time when those laws became Michigan law, it was while we were building, when we were the arsenal of democracy, the heavy industrial base. We were moving steel and gravel and iron and tanks and airplanes. Now, you could make the argument that all of that weight spread out over 11 axles is dangerous or has a severe impact, negative impact on the roads. But you could also say that splitting that up over 2 trucks would add congestion, delays, and further damage of 2 trucks going down the road. So we've had those conversations. We've looked at the funding. The point that I bring up about the road funding is because what we've done over the last 2 years to strengthen Michigan's bond rating, you're going to hear the governor come out next Wednesday and put forth very specific plan for dealing with our crumbling infrastructure. And you can't take the dollars out of the equation. It will be part of the conversation going on, and I think what you'll hear next Wednesday is a lot of time spent on the infrastructure question. But it's
I'm not taking the dollars out because I don't think we don't need them. I'm taking it out because I want to know from the engineering side. I agree, warrant the roads, but I'll tell you what, the first contractor that has a failing road because the design didn't function, he's going to go back to the designer and say, hey,
I built the road, the plans, the specifications.
Right,
You're,
you got this going on.
exactly.
And so that's the whole design build
So-
idea, where
someone-
you hire a contractor to do the complete reconstruction. You can't get a road warranty unless you have complete control from beginning to end over that road construction project. So there are only a handful of contractors in the country that can come in and do that kind of a big job. We've experimented with it on several projects. If you want to contact my office, I'm happy to have a further conversation with you on trends, on where we're going on road warranty, new materials, and bases and engineering.
Okay, all right. We have a question in the back.
Mike Lajak from KPAC. Senator Green is probably for you. You live the life. We all live in a budget. And you've seen it done well in your life and your children. Can you teach the sausage makers how to budget money?
It's all about budget.
It is all about budgets. We came to office 2 years ago, and our budget was $1.8 billion over budget, and we cut it out. We live very, very, very tight to our budget. Is there some fluff in it now? Yeah, I believe there's some fluff in it, but not much. Because of the unemployment, our Medicaid has just gone out of sight. People that have run out of unemployment. And you can argue, what is the reason? Why did they? Is there not jobs? That's another picture. But there's a lot of people out here living without a job, without any health insurance, if you bought health insurance lately, you know what that costs? People can't afford it on a $4, $5, $6 an hour job. But the Medicaid part of our budget is just going crazy, and that's really what's killing us. The other one is, we talked about it, is corrections. 1/4 of our whole budget is spent on corrections. It's hard to imagine that, but we still believe that the administration has some more fat in that budget that we could cut. And we still think there's some there. It's just a matter of finding it and getting it out of the administration and getting them to believe in it. There's been some things we've done on that. We've passed legislation to let one prison up north go private. I'm not sure privatization of our prisons is the answer to our problems, but I do know the high cost of prisons is killing our budget. We talk about other things. If you're an ag person, during the Grand Home Administration, they almost obliterated the ag department. The smallest budget there is. In fact, started turning things over to people to inspect their own products for foodborne illness, which we made a change to that. And we've added some things back in there. But priorities of budgeting is trying to make changes from the way it was 8 years ago. I mean, and again, we've reduced a lot of money in the last 8 years, even getting to where we're at. But budgeting is a priority, and I've got to say, I really believe that we've done a pretty good job budgeting what we've got and spending what we got. We're still looking for fat, and we're still looking for places where we can cut, because our revenue's not going to be coming in this year that came in last year. So we've got to reduce some more budgeting, cutting them down, re-looking at some other things. But I really believe, assessing the whole budget, there's not a lot of fat there, but we will cut some more out, I'll tell you that.
Okay, I have a question here.
Recently, Diane Hathaway resigned as Supreme Court judge. It's very recent. Any whispers who the governor might appoint and replace?
I don't.
Actually, she didn't resign, she retired.
Did you get that?
She was retired.
She was retired.
All right, I have a question in the back.
Hi, my name is Ron Peter, and is there any news on the bridge, the international bridge? Is that going to be built or not built, or is it on hold?
I'll tell you, it's been taken out of our hands. I don't believe that there will be any money appropriated from the legislature for that, unless we're ordered by the courts to do it. There's some things that the governor is working on with some federal money. I'd be very surprised if we see any kind of a bridge in the next number of years. It's going to be tied to the court for a long time. Matty Maroon has vowed to fight it until he doesn't have any money left, and he's got a lot of money.
All right. I have a quick question for Senator Green. Would you come up so you can ask your question? Yeah. Senator, I wasn't able to attend the meeting where I'm sure that you guys talked about right to work, and so far it hasn't come up. And I'm just curious, and I'm sure many people here in this room are curious. I'll just be honest with you. I don't believe that it was because of you were afraid of a recall that you chose not to vote. Maybe, but there were plenty of gentlemen who were not afraid of a recall. And since you are going to be serving our district, I just want to get a little view into your mind as to why. And the reason that I'm curious is because the statistics and the numbers speak for themselves. And so I'm just curious, what would make you not want to vote for something that would be so beneficial, and that you're putting yourself on the other side of the issue when it's, I mean, you say you're a Tea Party guy, so we're just curious.
Well, voting for right to work or not right to work is not a Tea Party. I'm not sure that it's a Tea Party issue. It's not.
Free market is a Tea Party issue.
I'm not, but I didn't say that I was afraid of a recall. I'd take on a recall whenever you want, but those in my caucus realized that there was going to be a whole bunch of recalls, and they wanted to stop the collateral damage.
So if it weren't for the recall, you would have voted yes? The threat of recall?
No, I don't think it was the threat. Well, probably, I guess.
Okay.
The money that would have been spent,
So do you agree that right to work is good for the state of Michigan?
not 100%.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know, you know. I'm sure we'll be working together in the future. All right, we've got another question. I want to slip that in there. Here we go.
I would just like to thank Mr. Green for his stance on right to work. Be that as it may, we'll talk about that some other time. But what you were talking about the Ambassador Bridge, Manny Maroon purchased the terminal I used to work at down in the Detroit River, where the actual site of the bridge is going to go across. So you're going to have, as you said, a hell of a long time before that bridge ever goes across that river. That's all I got to say about it.
Okay.
And his pockets are deep.
Let me just say one thing, just cover that up a little bit.
All right.
Please don't judge everything about Mike Green by one vote.
Well, I don't know a lot about you.
Well, you'll find out. I mean, I'm not running right today. Okay, and I'll be back, and we can talk about some more stuff.
Okay. All right.
Gentlemen, I've got a gal, actually, one of our regular people that come to the meetings here, she was unable to, she actually emailed me the question. And in her email, she said she really is getting tired of seeing Jeffrey Feiger on the TV. And she's asking about tort reform and about if we can do something working towards tort reform for the coming year. Is that on the radar? Is that something that could be worked on?
We just passed a couple bills on medical malpractice reform, which were probably not the fanciest bills in the world, but it did go a long ways to help some of the folks on medical malpractice. That has not been one of our issues this term, has it? Not that we haven't had a lot of issues. And we're going to redo our ideas on what's going to happen in the next 2 years in a couple weeks in the caucus, so undoubtedly that'll probably be on the list.
And who doesn't like Jeffrey Feiger? One of the things on tort reform is we're going to go back, and we weren't successful in the last 2 years of dealing with the catastrophic claims issue and reform to our auto insurance system. And just be assured that that conversation will probably start back up again when we look at auto rates. But the other thing, the flip side to auto rates is the tort reform and the frivolous lawsuits and the things that go along with that. And I know in the Senate, we have a couple of attorneys that serve in the Senate that have a keen eye on this as well. But it's certainly it's a driver of so many different things. It's built into the cost of every vehicle and every product that you buy. And so, you know, there's going to be opportunity to do a lot of work in that area.
In my America, that irritates the heck out of me when he comes out and says, in my America. No, we, just from an agriculture standpoint, we attempted to address a few of the tort reforms when it comes to equine issues and ag tourism. We weren't able to get those through. I expect those to come back up again. We really wanted to get those done. They actually shouldn't have been. They actually came into the ag committee, so there was a little bit of a flack because they thought they should have been in the judiciary committee. And they probably should have been, but we tried to get them through. In fact, I think we did pass the one through the House committee, but they never let it come up to the floor. So we do want to cover some of those issues, and those are a lot smaller scale, but it needs to be covered all the way across the board.
All right, just one or two more questions here, probably. Right there in the back, and then if you can go, sir, back to Bill and ask your question next, that would be great.
Irene Nowak from Dryden. Thank you for your right to work vote. Obamacare, so many groups are exempt. I want to be exempt. What is going on?
Well, again, that's a federal issue. Unfortunately, you know, we did, in fact, in my opinion, in the House, we're the ones that stopped the exchanges from happening in our state, and I think that's what we can do here. You know, I'm a firm believer we shouldn't be exempting anybody from these things. That's why I'm in favor of, I think that, you know, we try to be fair and equitable. I think we've done a better job in the last 2 years than ever been done before. On all the types of issues we've done. You know, the tax credits, I've never voted for tax credits. I don't like tax credits, or very seldomly, I should say, because you're picking winners and losers. And I know there's a disagreement about whether the tax on seniors was fair or not. I think it was as fair as we could get, and I think by the time it's finished, it will be fair and equal across the board. So, you know, again, that's a federal issue. The exemptions were done at the federal level. I don't know that we can address that here, other than try to stop it from happening in our state, which is what we're trying to do.
Question here?
I got a question regarding water. What do you know, or what are we doing to preserve the fresh water in the Great Lakes water basin? You know, considering the global demand for water is projected and continuing to spike.
Right now, we're losing it all into the air. All the Great Lakes are down astronomical proportions. We don't get some snow this winter or some rain. We're not having beaches left. What are we doing to protect our water from going other places, I think? Is that your question? There is nothing on point that I'm aware of that's going to allow any state to steal our water. There is some legislation that we've dealt with. We dealt with it this year, and that's how you use the water that comes out of the ground, such as bottling facilities that bottle water, and they take our water somewhere else. Because all the water that's used here in Michigan, it's all recycled. It doesn't go anywhere. I mean, it goes out in our whole world. There's only so much water, and it all gets recycled, and it all comes back into the ground. So to protect our Great Lakes, we have, I think, some pretty good laws protecting our Great Lakes from anybody stealing them, but we do have some problems. We had some problems with irrigation this summer. I'm not sure if you had problems here in Lapeer County. In the farmers were pumping water like crazy. It was running wells dry in their areas. We worked on some legislation to help that, not to mandate stopping of the irrigation, but more or less to regulate it and make sure farmers are more knowledgeable of their neighbors and irrigate a little bit more. So I don't know of anything that's going to steal our water from the Great Lakes.
Okay.
And I was specifically also contamination, like whether it's fracking or injection wells, is, you know, I know there's some of that happening. You know, are we addressing those issues and where that contamination is happening? Because I know we just signed leases to frack the entire state of Michigan, and that's probably at some point going to affect us. So, you know, is that really a great idea?
Well, one of the things that we did in 2008, Michigan is one of the 8 states and 2 provinces with Canada that signed on the Great Lakes Water Compact. when you take a look at regionally where the Great Lakes Basin is, we have all 8 states and both provinces all passed the very same legislation that limits and prohibits not only the withdrawal, but any diversion out of the Great Lakes Basin. So what was really interesting about that is every state, one state has veto authority of any water leaving the other side of our basin. So you have some built-in safeguards there. And, you know, and within that legislation, we're even regulating the pump head of the sprinkler system at the golf course. And one of the things that Michigan was a leader in is developing a tool to determine our quality streams and our cold water resources for the very first time in a very scientific way to be able to look at it. But when you look at Great Lakes level, I live on the St. Clair River in that area, now by Marine City. The docks are just, it looks like they're just jetties out into the lake. We're down several feet in our lakes. But it's a function of a lot of other factors, but it's not diversion.
Okay, did we have one more question there? This young man?
My name is David Nowak from Dryden. We talked this evening about balancing budgets, but we also need to consider revenues and other revenue streams. And we can look no farther than the state of Ohio to the south of us. We can look states like Pennsylvania and North Dakota. And what I'm talking about is huge shale deposits. And I don't know what the state of Michigan is doing, but we have the potential here to really provide a lot of jobs for folks and revenue in this state by horizontal drilling. The concept of what happens with fracking in the water, we're now actually recycling the water in these various states too. Here's the point. I mean, if you look at the unemployment rate, even in Ohio, due to fracking and horizontal drilling, that's incredible. That's incredible revenues. Is the state of Michigan heavily regulating this so that the drillers won't come in? Now, historically, we've drilled oil and gas wells for decades in the state, if not more, 50 years. But we have the potential with the shale deposits to really provide a lot of work for people in this state. There's a lot of revenues, I think, and if we're regulating this, or these drillers are not coming in, I think that's something we need to consider. And we've been fracking for decades. The fracking is safe. The water issues, you have to read the other side. I'm a geologist, okay? We have to look at both sides of this story. So my question to you is, are we regulating the drillers out of this state?
No, I don't think so. I think you'll find that in Michigan, we're fracking the daylights out of the state. And I'm serious. We have more natural gas in Michigan than almost any other state. And we can, if we was able to get that out, we could have our own energy and not have to rely on anybody else for our energy. And you will hear the governor's State of the State coming up, what his thoughts are on the energy and what we got to do with fracking. I'm convinced, I'm not a geologist, I can only look at studies and read things. I'm not an expert on it. I'm convinced from what I've seen that all the fracking that goes on is so far below our water system, I personally don't believe it's having any effect on our water. I mean, we're talking about miles below our drinking water system. So no, we're not regulating. In fact, we're profiting. All the money from all that we're getting from that drilling, the state's royalty is going to the Natural Resources Trust Fund that's never had as much money in it as it is now. The Natural Resources Trust Fund is capped. Now all the money is spilling over to the State Park Fund, which is good because it's good for Michigan to be able to provide our visitors a nice place to camp in Michigan. And it's not coming out of tax dollars, it's coming out of that revenue.
Okay, all right, that's it for tonight. Everybody, thank you for your questions, and thank you, gentlemen, for your answers. We really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to have Terry Floater close the evening, and if you'll stand with us.
Thank you. I want to say something really quick before our last prayer. I did miss one announcement, and I apologize. We are in the process of forming the Danette Lowry Lapeer County Tea Party Scholarship. It is in its infancy stages. It is a high school scholarship for college students that are going into college. The student must be a senior in high school of any Lapeer County school, public, parochial, private, or homeschool, or because of school of choice, an applicant can be a Lapeer County resident who is a senior in a school in another district. The theme will be announced formally on March 1st. The deadline for entry will be June 1st, the winner to be announced on August 1st, and the winner must present their essay at the August meeting. Please see me if you have any suggestions, ideas. We're certainly open to them. Do we still have a wireless mic available? There's somebody I want to introduce you to, let you know how prayers are answered. If you recall last month, if you were here, we announced that two of our very good members, very strong members, had some medical challenges. And the surprise I have to announce is that they're both here tonight. We have Bill Stanton, he's back there in the video, he's back this month. And then the other person I want to introduce you to is the one who I said had a very horrific accident last summer. She has had multiple challenges, and it was a big surprise to see her here tonight. We dedicated our prayer to her last month, and I'd like you to see Carol Brown.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all the cards and emails, encouragement, most of all the prayers, because God is faithful and He's bringing me through this. I had a motorcycle accident in August and several surgeries and challenges, but He's in control, and we're going to follow His will and know that things are going to turn out good for us. Thank you all.
Welcome back, Sarah. Okay, if I could, I'd like to say our closing prayer. I'm going to keep it short for you because I know it's been a long evening. So please pray with me. Heavenly Father, as we depart this evening, we acknowledge that there are still massive challenges ahead of us. We thank you for this opportunity to gather here tonight, joined in friendship and patriotism. Please enfold us in your bright light of love and safety as we head home. We ask that you protect us and our families. We ask that you keep our elected officials who are here tonight safe as they do their best to promote conservatism and represent our core beliefs. Their courage is important to us, so we ask that you keep them strong and determined. Father, many tragedies have befallen our great country in the very recent past, from a ravaging storm to a savage crime involving beautiful innocent children and adults who are simply going to school. We seek your wisdom and your protection. Please wrap those victims in your arms as we seek comfort and healing through your name. Father, please keep us, our families, our state, and our country safe until we meet again. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it very much.